Hi friends! So this week we're going to be talking about the elements of fictional text. Fictional text. Fictional text are stories that are completely made up. But this week you're going to be learning about two types of fictional text. The first one is realistic fiction, and the other one is fantasy fiction. So let's talk about the difference between them real quickly. So realistic fiction are stories that are made up but could happen in real life. So for example, the people in the stories and animals in the stories act like normal people would and act like normal animals would. The setting is a place that is a real place in this world, and the events could really happen, and a lot of times the characters have problems that they have to solve. So let's look at an example real quick. So we have the Ladybug Girl and the Bug Squad. So in this story, as you can see on the cover, we see a real girl, a dog who has a collar on like normal pets do. And if you flip through it just a little bit, you see that real things that are happening in the story could happen in real life. Like her and her friends are dressed up, but they're walking through a forest. They're all wearing normal clothes, acting like normal people. So the Ladybug Girl and the Bug Squad would go under realistic fiction. Now let's talk about fantasy fiction. Fantasy is stories that are made up and events that could not really happen in real life. That's where like animals talk and wear clothes, and kind of like you're using your imagination with fantasy fiction. So let's look at this book. Don't Let the Pigeon Drive the Bus. I know we're all familiar with this book, but as you go through this, the pigeon is talking. The pigeon is trying to drive the bus, and we know that in real life, pigeons don't talk, and they definitely don't drive buses. So that goes under fantasy fiction. Now let's look through a couple other examples. Dinner with Olivia. If you look at the cover, we see some pigs, but right here, Olivia the pig is wearing a dress. Her brothers are wearing clothes. They're also eating spaghetti and holding knives and forks. And we know, even if we flip through here too, we know pigs don't talk. We know pigs don't use silverware to eat their food. So Dinner with Olivia would go under fantasy fiction because it's completely made up and would never happen in real life. The next one is the Bee Tree. And we can see right now that there are people on the front who are in normal people clothes, doing normal people activities. This man right here is catching a bee with a jar. And as you read this book, because of course you're going to have to read the book to find out, but I was picking just some examples. In here, the characters are doing what normal humans would do. The animals, they're not in clothes, they're acting like normal animals. And you see like real life houses and the fields. So I see a lot of things that could happen in real life, but we know with realistic fiction, people act the same, animals act the same, but the story is just made up. So this story, The Bee Tree, is not a true story, but it could happen in real life. So that's going to be realistic fiction. The next one, let's see. Arthur's Tooth. We all know all the kinds of Arthur books. So in this book, we know that Arthur and his friends are a bunch of different kinds of animals, and they all go to school, they all wear clothes. So this is an easy one, and they all talk as well. So we know that in real life, this type of book and this type of story would never happen because animals don't wear clothes, animals don't go to school, and they don't act like humans. So Arthur's Tooth goes under fantasy fiction because it's completely made up. Let's go to A Chair for My Mother. So in this story, even on the front cover, we see people who are dressed normally. They're going to a restaurant right here, which we know is real in real life. And if you go through this book, we see some scenarios that could happen in real life. Like sitting at home at a table, she's there with her family. I see a cat here, and the cat is acting like a normal cat would. Kind of flipping through, they're walking on the street wearing normal clothes. So once again, with realistic fiction, it has all the elements of things that could happen in real life. It's just not a true story. So A Chair for My Mother did it really happen, but everything in it could happen in real life. So that goes under realistic fiction. So let's review really quickly one more time. Fantasy fiction are stories that are completely made up with all kinds of crazy things, like animals that wear clothes, animals that can talk, maybe places that aren't a part of our normal world. And so here were just a few examples of fantasy fiction. And realistic fiction are stories that are made up, but they could also happen in real life. So even though they have a lot of real things in real life, like people acting like normal people and pets acting like normal pets and people wearing normal clothes and doing normal things that people would do, it could be realistic fiction because it's not a true story. It's not based off of something that really happened, but it has real parts of our lives in it. So, and it's based off of things that could really happen if it were true. So now you know how to sort the difference between realistic fiction and fantasy fiction. So this week, while you're reading stories, see if you can identify if it's realistic or fantasy.